6th, 2020. For a moment of silence, let's remember Memorial Day. It was yesterday, so let's have a moment of silence for all that we've lost that defended our country. Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. LeBlanc,
Here.
Mr. Salazar,
Here.
Mr. Rutledge,
Here.
Mrs. Costa,
Here.
Mrs. LeBlanc,
Here.
Mrs. Hall,
Here.
Mrs. Thurston,
Here.
Mr. Ryder,
Here.
Chairman Krusell.
Here. Thank you all for perfect attendance again. Number 4, board guests. Mr. Drezek, would you like to introduce her?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since March 12th, it seems like we've been getting, at least you and the public have been getting updates on how distance learning and virtual learning and Zooming from home and everything has been going. And we thought it was important to get a teacher's perspective on how things are, the good, the bad, and the challenging. And who better than to have our Teacher of the Year, Pam Estes, come share her experiences with us, with the board, and with the community to see the teaching perspective of just how challenging this is, but hopefully at some point how rewarding this will be down the road. So I did reach out and ask Pam if she was willing to join us tonight, and she accepted, and I promised she can go first, and she didn't have to go that long. So I'm going to turn it over to our reigning Teacher of the Year, Pam.
Thank you for having me.
Ms. Estes, you're on the air.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I just hope everyone's families are healthy and well. And I want to express my gratitude to Enfield Public Schools for giving all the teachers the opportunity to distance teach. We didn't know what this was going to look like when we first left school. So I just want to say thank you. It has been a joy to connect virtually with my students and my colleagues. And anything in my presentation that might be seemingly negative is meant to be constructive and not critical. So I prepared a PowerPoint with slides that I pre-recorded talking about them. So maybe I could let it play through and then I'll take questions at the end if you have any.
Perfect, thank you.
Pam, if you have sound with this, make sure you turn the sound volume up on your device.
Can you guys not hear it well?
We don't hear it at all.
Really? I'm sorry. All right. Let me try something out.
Well, we can hear her now, Walter.
Oh, you could? I didn't hear it.
Oh.
I couldn't hear anything.
Okay. Let me try one more time. And if not, I can just speak to each slide if I need to. Let me try it one more time. My volume's all the way up and I've shared my screen. Let me just.
The screen.
Maybe it was because you were on mute.
Oh, good idea. Maybe that's it. Let me try again. You hear it now?
Yep.
Thumbs up if you can hear it.
When you're sharing your screen, Pam, why don't you try sharing your desktop? Is there a choice of sharing the desktop? In that way, it will take everything.
Sharing the desktop. Oh, share computer sound. Okay, I think I got it now then. Okay, Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this is not going well.
We are all learning.
Try from the beginning. Hi, my name is Pam Estes, and I'm going to present about distance learning from the teacher perspective. I am one teacher, so please take into account that my perspective may differ from others. But hopefully, what I'm about to say will give you some. Can you hear it now? Although distance.
Yep.
Okay, all right, I'll start from the beginning then. Okay. Hi, my name is Pam Estes, and I'm going to present about distance learning from the teacher perspective. I am one teacher, so please take into account that my perspective may differ from others. But hopefully, what I'm about to say will give you some insight on what distance learning has been like. I'm going to cover some of the challenges, but also things to celebrate. Although distance learning has created some challenges, there are many things to celebrate. First, I'd like to give a shout out to the JFK faculty. I have always been proud to be part of JFK, but distance learning has shown me what high quality teachers we have in Enfield. We are adaptable and flexible. We have worked together to go above and beyond to help each other deliver instruction to improve student learning outcomes. I haven't heard any complaints from my colleagues other than being overwhelmed and concerned for our students' well-being. Many of my colleagues have commented that they have worked harder in these last few months than they ever have. Personally, everything I have posted on Teams has been shared in considerations of students and their families, to not overwhelm, to offer flexibility, and to meet the needs of all students. I believe every teacher in Enfield is doing their best to do the same. Microsoft Teams. I'm not sure you are aware, but many teachers in Enfield were not familiar with this learning platform, but we learned it quickly and enthusiastically. Hopefully, we can bring this new knowledge into the classroom this fall, and if not, we will be more prepared for distance learning if needed. Department lesson planning. I have been so impressed by all the departments virtually meeting to plan differentiated lessons that allow low-performing students to access the materials and challenge gifted students. Decline in discipline issues. I am not trying to be funny when I say that teachers are celebrating the lack of discipline issues in the virtual classroom. Our amazing students and supportive parents. I am so impressed with our students' resilience and their ability to tackle the team learning environment and engage in their learning on a daily basis. I am also impressed by the number of supportive parents who have written kind emails and expressed their appreciation for all the teachers do for them and our students. Distance learning has inevitably come with some challenges. First, inequality. I am struggling. I'm struggling with how to meet the needs of all my kids with the vast inequalities that exist. Some of my kids may live in an unstable home. They're experiencing food insecurity. Someone they love may be dealing with COVID-19. They're sharing devices with parents and multiple siblings. Many of my students are not self-motivated, and they need adults to help them review directions and keep them on task. Distance learning is more successful with an engaged and present parent. Student engagement. It has been difficult to engage students of all different learning styles when we're working on one platform. Misconceptions about students' technology skills. We tend to think of our youth as very gifted in knowing how to use technology, but making TikTok videos or posting on Instagram, those skills don't translate well into distance learning. One-to-one devices. At the middle school, our students don't have one-to-one devices, so they're submitting work and completing their work on phones, iPads, desktops, Chromebooks. They send files as PDFs, JPEGs, Word documents, and attach their work all over the place on Teams. When troubleshooting with them, it's difficult to know what things look like on the student end. Lack of training. As I mentioned before, teachers did not receive any training on Teams prior to the pandemic. We relied on YouTube videos, exploration, and discussions among colleagues to figure out the platform in a very short amount of time. Working from home. I'm sure many of you can empathize with this. Teachers have their own children and own lives to deal with while delivering instruction. My husband is also a teacher, and he is home, but his district is participating in synchronous learning. So I'm often on my own, not only doing my teaching job, but homeschooling my 1st and 4th grader. It's been challenging. My son is dyslexic and dysgraphic, so he has to have everything read to him. Lack of human connection. This is probably the biggest challenge of all. It's ironic that in my Teacher of the Year video, it was all about human connection. I miss my students so much. I love my students, and it has been very stressful worrying about them, their mental health, and what they might be going through. School is a happier place than home for some of my kids. The students know that we miss them and that we love them, and we're trying our best to make distance learning as painless as possible. On one of my last slides, I just would like to discuss synchronous versus asynchronous learning and teaching. Online can be delivered in two ways. Synchronously, like for example, we're all going to meet on Tuesday at 3 p.m. or asynchronously, we'll have a discussion on the discussion board from Friday at 7 p.m. to Sunday 7 p.m. Asynchronous activities take the pressure off of you and your students to be in a certain place at a certain time, and also lowers the bandwidth requirement at any given moment. In my community in Massachusetts, there's been some criticism of the teachers that they're not holding classes at certain times and delivering instruction and teaching the students live. That model just doesn't work unless your students have one-to-one technology prior to the pandemic and have previous training on the learning platform. In other districts in Connecticut, I know parents might be comparing what they might be doing in, the town next door, but those models of synchronous learning that have worked, the students were already trained on those platforms, so this transition was somewhat seamless. Where in Enfield, we were starting from the beginning. So I personally believe that asynchronous is much more successful with our students. It offers them flexibility, offers the parents flexibility for all students to achieve success. Lastly, I just want to consider what teachers might need to improve distance learning. When possible, some more professional development on distance learning, and if possible, one-to-one devices. And if that's not possible, then some consideration for teachers doing their best working across all different devices. Thank you so much for listening, and now I will open it up to any questions.
Thank you for that video. So, like I said, we're going to start with Mr. Ryder. Any questions?
No, I don't have any specific questions, but I wanted to thank you for trying to share the teacher side of this for everybody. I can share and echo the parent side, and I've tried to do that, and it is difficult, and I can imagine that you're getting things different ways from different folks, and I understand the sort of the limitations that we have with this. I can also say from a parent's perspective, it's been getting better every week. My son's teacher has been doing class meetings at 1 o'clock for weeks and weeks and weeks. My daughter in 6th grade has a different experience where she gets all of her assignments on Monday and works more independently. And it's just different by grade, it's different by class, it's different by subject. So anything you can do or think of that gives some more uniformity to this from your perspective, just let us know. Because like I said, it has been getting better. We're looking for a breather, but I do see this heading in the right direction. I just want to thank you.
Do your kids feel overwhelmed at home by the amount of work that they're getting?
My daughter doesn't, because she is one of those type A's and just give me a pile of work and by Thursday you'll get it all back. And her team at JFK has been fantastic. And I know you're at JFK as well. My son in 3rd grade, again, has a teacher that jumped onto the e-learning right away, the DL e-learning. So he has had a very good time of it. I just know that like I have neighbors where like he's in room X in the same school where somebody's in room Y, and there's just been some differences in the amount of work they've been getting, some inconsistencies there. But again, a lot of that has been more uniform in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
So, and we can definitely see that. The 3rd grader does feel overwhelmed. He's not one that got up every day and said, yay, I can't wait to go to school today. So having him sit at my desk in front of the computer and, seeing 8 or 9 friends, but not everybody, has been challenging for an 8-year-old. And I've got a lot of feedback similar to that from the K2 schools. It's harder, I think, when you're younger. And like you said, we weren't trained on this before departing on March 12th. So all of a sudden, on May X. We've all had to figure it out. So I think it's been harder as you're younger. The 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds are probably having a little bit harder time with this, or the parents are in coaching them because they're all working from home too. So yeah, I think just the variations by grade has been hard to overcome. But I will say the feedback I'm getting has been more positive, I'm starting to figure more of this out as a parent the last, say, 10 days.
Well, that's good. It's funny, I have 2 kids, 1st and 4th grade, and the 4th grader, even though he's dyslexic, it's been pretty seamless. And he's independent for the most part, but my 1st grader is really struggling.
Yeah,
But
I'm hearing that from the K2 schools.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for sharing. That's lots of good feedback for us.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Ms. Thurston.
I'm all set. I just wanted to congratulate her on a job well done. And thank you for everything you're doing for our students.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Thurston. Ms. Hall.
Congratulations on being able to adjust to the significant change you've experienced.
Oh, thank you.
Now, if everybody else in the world can become equally diligent and successful, our future looks a little brighter. And the one-to-one, I believe we've already acknowledged, is really necessary. But it still will be a problem where parents are working and have to working at home and require the same equipment. Becomes a problem, I suspect. But I haven't had experience with it, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. LeBlanc.
Ms. Estes, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I know me and Scott are getting a lot of emails and correspondence with parents talking about not having that synchronous day learning that you speak of. And so now I feel like I have a really good explanation to give them during this. I think with the parents, it's been it's just been a frustrating time just because a lot of them are working from home, and every parent wants the best for their students. So they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves to make sure the assignments and everything is completed. And some of it's overwhelming, especially if you have kids in high school because of some of the classes that they're taking. But I think that this is a great explanation and definitely a great perspective to look at. One of the things that resonated with me was you talked about the lack of human connection, and I feel that for the teachers. The reason why you became a teacher is not to work from home and have virtual lessons, but to interact with students on a day-to-day basis. And that's what makes a lot of the teachers tick, is being able to be with their students in a day. And I think that that's also an issue for the kids, because they're lacking that not only with their teacher, but with their friends and the constituents. Because I think with all this virtual learning beyond the academics, there's a lot of those other components that people don't realize that are important, that are missing from the students' lives. But I just really wanted to say thank you for your presentation. I thought it was wonderful, and I appreciate your teaching perspective. So thank you.
Thank you for letting me share my perspective.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc. Ms. Costa.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for all the extra effort you're putting into this. I know it hasn't been easy for teachers, students, parents, or anybody. I did have a list of 1 million questions, but your slide answered all but 2.
Oh, good.
You talked about training going forward. Do you think that as teachers, you still need more training on formalized training on teams? And what other kinds of training do you think would be helpful to make distance learning successful, should it be required in the future as well?
Yeah, I think Teams is a great platform. From what I've talked about with colleagues, we're happy with that particular platform. And I just think more professional development and time to explore that platform. I know teachers have started using OneNote for the first time, and just getting some ideas of the different creative things that we can do. I mean, I would love to have synchronous learning if we continue this. my husband works in another district where he's doing synchronous learning, but all of his kids had devices beforehand, and he was already delivering instruction in September on that platform. So, if possible, one-to-one devices, but I know that with everything going on in the economy, that's probably not a likely thing to happen. And if not, just more discussions about how we can do our best and deliver the best instruction that we can.
Even if we had one-to-one devices, though, wouldn't we still have an issue with parents that have to work outside the home and kids are either in daycares or other environments? So it's still going to be hard to do a synchronous kind of delivery.
Yeah. I mean, it is very difficult, especially for parents that work outside the home. Some parents are working all day and then coming home and trying to help their kids get through material. And a lot of children need an adult present to read directions and to re-explain things, which I'm not quite sure how to replicate that in the home environment unless there is an adult present. So some professional discussions on that would be good.
Okay. And my other question is, do you think that you have enough opportunity in today's format to capture the students that are suffering academically, but more importantly, emotionally?
Not right now. No. I mean, I have a few students that I have not been able to connect with. And I know that goes a lot across the board. I can't speak for elementary and high school, but I know at the middle school, we're concerned about the kids that we haven't been able to make contact with. And those kids are the ones that we put that extra time and effort in person before we were distance learning, and they need that adult connection to be there over their shoulder, encouraging them. And, a lot of our kids, who knows what's going on at home, where distance learning just is really taking a back seat. So,
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Mr. Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I just want to say I absolutely love the memes in your presentation there. I've used many of those in the past myself. I think they were great. But on a more serious point, you made a very interesting point about the need for parent involvement to help motivate students who don't maybe have intrinsic motivation. You also mentioned, I think, and if I got the grades wrong, I apologize, but then in addition to teaching your JFK students, that you also homeschool your first and your fourth grader. So just out of curiosity, what advice would you give to parents who perhaps, one, struggle to keep their children educationally motivated, or two, who may be struggling with that dual role, so to speak, where not only are they having to aid in, the distance learning of their children, but they also have to, negotiate that with their work at home responsibilities?
I think the most important thing now for everyone, students and parents, is to put their mental health at the forefront. I've had days with my own children where I can tell that I've got a lot of work to do and my kids are melting down, and I just say, kids, go outside and play, go ride your bike, go run around. And it's just not as important as tackling your mental health at this point. That's just my perspective. So I would tell parents to relax, in the fall when we return or whenever we return. All of us, all the teachers, we know what's been going on and we know what they've missed. We know what they're not getting, and we'll just pick up the pieces when we get back. So if, both parents are working at the grocery store and can't do any homeschooling, that's okay. Just we'll address it when they come back to school, is what I would tell them. So does that answer your question?
Nope, definitely does. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rutledge. Mr. Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Estes, for your presentation today. It was very informative, certainly to me. I do have a couple of questions. One of them is, I got the sense that you as teachers are providing technical support to the students. Did I interpret that correctly? You mentioned something about, working with them with different platforms because they, the devices that they have. So is that part of the responsibilities you're carrying out right now as well?
Yeah, I mean, I have kids that are unsure of how to submit their work, even though videos and YouTube videos and directions have been sent out. I know that parents are overwhelmed, that they might not have had time to read them, and some of our kids don't read them. So I am doing a lot of support in terms of turning in things and how to format projects, how to change something to a PDF, or how to attach to a team. So yes, that has been a big part of the job. Another big part has been, from the teacher perspective, correcting. I feel like I'm spending most of my day receiving work from students and commenting on it and sending it back and things like that. And that's very different than my time in the classroom.
Okay, thank you for that. You answered my question. And then another question is, I'm not clear. I believe you said you personally favored asynchronous education, but then you praised synchronous education. And so what is, from your perspective, what is the differentiator, or what is the one that would cause one to be a better option for us moving forward than the other?
So in Enfield, if our technology situation stays the way that it is, where we have kids working across all different devices, I recommend asynchronous learning because it's very flexible. So for example, in my classes, I send out the assignments on Monday mornings. And in that assignment, there's a story that they have to read in Spanish. And then there's a video that they can play that talks about the story. And then they have a choice of 10 activities, and they have to complete anywhere from 3 to 5 of those activities of their choice. I found that this has made it very flexible for the kids, because they can do it on Monday when they get it, or they can turn it in on Friday when it's due. And I even take things past the due date. So it has been great for my kids as they're exploring Teams and figuring out how to use it, that they can log in at any time and do their Spanish work. And then I hold office hours where the kids can drop in, and if they don't understand the story, or they need an explanation of their final project, or any help, or if they just want to connect and talk to me, then they can drop in to those office hours. So the way things are in Enfield right now, that's what I recommend. Now, if we had one-to-one technology, we were able to go back in the fall, and teachers could start teaching on the Teams platform with that one-to-one technology, and the kids were really familiar with how to turn in things, and they were used to logging into different classes at certain times, then I would recommend synchronous learning. My husband works in a district that's doing that, and he has all of his students attending all of his classes almost all day long. But they were in a totally different place when this pandemic started. So I think we just have to do the best with what we've got. And if things stay the way that they are, then I think asynchronous learning is great. We just, but I would prefer to teach online classes if possible. We're also a much bigger district than a lot of districts, so that's something to consider as well. So. Okay, did I answer your question?
No, most definitely. I appreciate your input, your participation this afternoon, and please carry our heartfelt thanks to the rest of your team members, the rest of your teachers. Thank you.
I will. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. I thought it was informative and gave a perspective that we wouldn't necessarily get unless you presented it to us. And I found it very, the different ways to hold education from a distance. I kind of like how, you personally have a hybrid model, or try to approach that as best you can. I want to say that because I think going too far one way or the other both has its disadvantages if you carry one over the other. I think regardless, I mean, all this goes to show, as a society as a whole, I think, we won't ever take going to school for granted again, and having teachers like you for sure. So again, thank you for everything you're doing. And last but not least, it's been said multiple times, but the importance of one-to-one technology, regardless if this continues on or not. I think it's necessary, and it'd be great if we could get that going for our school district as well as other school districts have done previously. So thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Well, I will echo everyone else because as it always happens, they ask my questions as they go along. So on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. Please give our regards to the rest of the faculty at JFK. We are glad that they're working as hard as they are to keep our kids as motivated as they can in this pandemic. So thank you again for coming on board. Mr. Drezek, you have anything else to add?
So Pam gets credit for anything I'm about to say because she kind of covered everything that I had to say. So she got me off the hook for having to talk later.
Well, you're going to repeat everything anyway. So
thank you again, Pam, for doing this, especially on somewhat short notice. But I knew when I asked you that it wouldn't be just I'll log on and tell everybody. There's a reason why you're the Teacher of the Year is because within a very short period of time, you put together a better PowerPoint than I have since I've sat in this chair. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
And I'm glad that you mentioned, and one of the things in full disclosure, when I asked Pam if she'd be willing to do this, was I asked her to share the challenges that she's having. I think it's important not just for the 9 of you to know, but for the public to know that nobody knew how to do this. And it's glad to hear that we're getting a little bit better. But I didn't ask her to mention the importance of one-to-one devices for all of our kids. And if Pam hangs up before we get to that portion of the meeting, I am going to update the board that we are going to move in that direction. It's now become a necessity. So you'll find out later, but you're the first to know, and we'll call it the Estes Clause. Move the district into, all of our eyes have been open that this is a necessity for all of our kids now. So I will update you guys further on that, but I at least wanted Pam to hear that before she's able to hang up and go and do it. So thank you again.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And thanks for letting me share our perspective. It's really great to hear from all the voices in the community because this is a new thing for all of us. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. And again, send our regards to all the rest of the staff too, because everybody's doing a great job.
I will pass that along. Thank you.
And if you want to log out, be my guest.
Okay. I probably will because I have to cook dinner now. So.
There we go. See? Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all stay healthy and your families are well.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Number 5, Superintendent's Report. Mr. Drezek.
I got nothing to add. Kidding, but I will try to be brief. I know that there's still a lot of conversations with regards to graduation. So I'll give you as much of an update as I can at the moment. A little bit of a monkey wrench in that plan is that I'm sure most of you have heard over the weekend that Governor Baker in Massachusetts is allowing in-person graduations after July 20th. Governor Murphy in New Jersey made an announcement today. I watched our governor's press conference. He said that guidance will be coming out shortly on that. But what was missed in some of the articles, and I did share it with the entire board, was the actual requirements if you are choosing, and I want to give Ms. Hall credit because she read the whole thing before I had a chance to. The article that a lot of you had seen doesn't necessarily paint an easy, as more realistic as a picture of the requirements to have an in-person ceremony. So just for the members of the public at home, we have had multiple conversations internally. We've had multiple conversations with our friends at the state. And a couple of the things with regards to graduation that were shared with us from the state public health director was there is a misconception between opening up Connecticut and what's the difference of having a graduation ceremony. A graduation ceremony, by definition, is a gathering, not a business opportunity. It's not a entertainment event or however they're describing it. And that came straight from the head attorney at the State Department of Education. So the executive order till June 20th limits gatherings of people of more than 5. So although we can talk hypothetically about all these things we'd love to do for our kids, while that's the law of the land, you can't gather more than 5 kids. But the epidemiologist on the line shared with us that in the event we were going to pursue these, there would be questions that they would ask of us before we put our request to have an in-person ceremony together. Just, I know a lot of you know this, but for the benefit of those at home, I'm not taking a side either way to say I don't. I mean, my preference all along has been to get back to normal for these kids as quickly as we can. But there are a lot of things that if you were to request to have an outdoor ceremony and have, your public health director stamp it, there are things that would be a non-starter, such as you'd have to screen every person who came. You'd have to do temperature checks for anyone who came on your grounds. There would be no bathrooms permitted on the site. There's no handing of diplomas. Students can't throw their caps. You have to put limits on who would be able to attend. And the thing that really got most of me and my colleagues' attention was the subject of contact tracing, where if you were to have an event, if it were ever permitted, and for some reason there was a cluster outbreak in your community, Department of Public Health has an understanding that they're going to come in and do contact tracing. And where they were unclear was that in the event that outbreak was tied to your event, the liability that particular town would have. And no one would say, well, if you tried to do everything you can and there still was an outbreak, you're off the hook. No one would go, especially the legal team, wouldn't go to that line. So although everyone is hopeful and optimistic that at some point we can put something together for these kids, I think what's getting missed in the details are all the restrictions that are currently in place, and we'll get to that momentarily when we start talking about a reopening committee. There's a lot of things in the fine print that make these processes not just as easy as, well, we want to make a decision, we're going to go ahead and do it. I just think it's important for the parents to know, but especially for kids to know that we're doing everything we can to give them the best celebration we can. So what we are doing, as you heard, is we are going to have a drive-through commencement ceremony, as well as our virtual graduation ceremony that will take place on June 17th, which was the original graduation date. We are very clear on these calls that the restrictions, as you notice, they go in 30-day increments. So up till June 20th, it's at 5 people for a gathering. They've given us no indication that even though phase 2 would increase the amount of people in public gatherings, the numbers they're throwing around are 10s and 20s and 50s. You have to take in consideration our graduating class alone is 360. So one of the last things they said to us on this call was, if you're holding out hope that you're just going to push the date out into the summer and hope that you'll be able to have a regular ceremony as planned, you better plan a backup, because it's very possible that if you leave these kids with nothing in June, they're going to get nothing come August, nothing come September, and these kids are really going to miss out on something. So there was an emphasis to make sure that we did some sort of planning for these kids. And I did share our plan with our health director, Patrice, who's been a godsend through this process. And I know you're going to hear about what other towns are doing, but based on our size, that was the plan that Patrice was comfortable endorsing. So the plan that's out there, that's been communicated to some extent, with kids picking up their caps and gowns, kids going to the high school, they're going to be able to drive down, and it's going to be separated over multiple days because we can't have all of our graduates coming at once, again, based on the gathering side. But Patrice was comfortable with the format that we put out. There's going to be a stage set up in front of the auditorium. Kids will be able to get out of their vehicles, go across the stage. It's going to be decorated with as close to a traditional graduation stage as we can. The diplomas will be there for the child to pick up. The student will then be able to take professional photographs on the stage, get off the stage, get in their car. And I know there's discussions with SafeGrad to set up another distribution center at the main entrance of the school. So SafeGrad has the opportunity to give the seniors their gifts as well. That has all been authorized and approved. So the only thing that I'm hesitant on giving out right now is the dates that we're going to give the kids to come in and actually go take part in the ceremony. And the reason for that is Erin is waiting for some very crucial information before she makes those dates public. And the other piece of that is we're all hearing that we're going to be able to do them in July. So before we say we hand the diplomas out in June, if we're able to do them in July, that might change things. I don't anticipate it changing it, but we're just waiting there's some back orders on some of the things that we're waiting, but within the next couple of days, there will be designated times and and reservations for kids to come, so the kids will know when they can come, and their family members will also be able to be in the cars with them. So, there's other options that are out there where families are separated. They can see it, over a telecommunication. We tried to get the experience as close as we can so that families can actually be with their graduate and be as close to them and get a photograph with them as close as they can to have the best experience for everybody. So in the coming days, the instructions will be going out to kids as to what their time slots are, when they should be there. We're trying to get that out as soon as possible because we want to make sure that although we're only allowing one car, as many people in that family that want to come into that car are able to do so. That's the longest thing that's there. Distance learning, I think Pam summed it up. We're doing as best as we can. We're getting better every day, but there's still a lot of improvement that we can make. Segueing into what we said earlier, the state has made us aware. The application hasn't come out yet. We've been made aware that Enfield qualifies for what's called the Federal CARES Act, and that's federal funding that's being trickled down to local school districts based on your Title I enrollment. That we're due to anticipate about $735,000 of federal CARES money that none of us were expecting to get. I don't believe that we can use it as just a carryover to supplement our budget. There are very strict guidelines as to what these funds can be used for. And the top two requirements to use these funds are for access for technology and for technology for students. So what we've been working on over the last couple of weeks, we're trying to see how quickly we can procure enough devices so that every student in the Enfield Public Schools has their own device. They don't have to share with a sibling. They don't have to borrow their parents. And there's also availability for us to engage with the mobile carriers to acquire more hotspots for those families that may need additional broadband. The good news is now we think we have a way to pay for it. So we're working, Lorena and Guy are working diligently to figure out how we can better get these devices sooner, because what we're learning in our world, the equivalent to when this whole thing started, the shortage on toilet paper and hand sanitizer, what we're learning is electronic devices are our toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Everybody in the country is trying to get their hands on devices. Now we're fortunate that Guy has kind of locked Apple into finding these devices for us. But in order for us to get these up and running for September, we're going to need to move pretty soon. So I'm going to tell you, it's not something that takes a board vote when we get this type of thing, just like we did with the high school iPads, that we're going to move forward, because as we start talking more about the document I just shared with you guys, there is going to be a virtual learning component to whatever we do in September, whether it's in person or all virtual. And if we don't act, we're not going to have the devices in place in order to have that option of doing synchronous or asynchronous learning for our kids. So we're going to start that process now. We're hoping, because I'm getting a lot of calls from colleagues of mine who are asking me if I can have my Apple person's number, and I'm saying no. People are trying to get their hands on these devices, and they're running out pretty quickly. So we're going to need to move fast, but hopefully within the next time we meet or shortly after that, we'll be able to lay out a pretty detailed plan. And more importantly, we would have figured out a way to pay for it without having to go to you guys and say, go to the council and ask for more money. So that's the main goal. I'm pretty confident on that aspect between what we're getting in for grant money and other areas we're able to massage. But right now, that's our number one priority. The second priority, Pam touched on as well. Once we get the devices and the access, we need to do a better job of showing everybody how to use it. And that doesn't just mean teachers. Our kids had zero exposure to Teams before they left. And my kids are in a district where they were using their platform as part of their regular learning. We never had that need in order to do that. So really focusing our efforts on increasing the access to technology and increasing how we use it and better. The Teams format that we're on right now has a lot of capabilities that we never imagined we'd have to use. There's a lot we can do. It's never going to replicate what a kid is going to get in the classroom, ever. So where people out there saying, virtual learning is going great. It's not. It's going as well as it can. But we can enhance our program for our kids. More importantly, allow us to have better human interactions with our kids, and our teachers having more human interaction by providing them with the tools that they need. So we're going to talk about that next. And lastly, before I get into, we're going to talk about it later on the agenda. So the state of Connecticut sent us all a draft of the Reopen Connecticut guidelines and the rules for operating summer school. Now, it is still a draft, but what we were shared with during our phone call with the commissioner was we're going to be sending you a draft on summer school. That's going to be a precursor for what opening up in September is going to look like. So when we all got it, the first thing I did is I shared it with Patrice, and she responded to me within minutes and said, it's impossible. And if you had an opportunity to read the document, you can see that it is going to be a significant challenge. I emailed you all late last week to say, no, we're trying to go in different directions and through all of our committee work, but we're going to be at a point where we're going to have two options. And unfortunately, we're going to have to plan for both. We're going to have to plan for all virtual learning or a hybrid of reopening with the guidelines as well as a component of virtual learning, because there's going to be some overlap. We are taking we're going forward on the virtual learning piece because we need to be prepared. We can't get caught again like we were this time. No one's fault, it was a pandemic. But now that we know where our weaknesses are, we have an obligation to improve. The other piece is my assumption, in talking to colleagues and friends, everyone believes that it's going to look something similar to this when they tell us we can come back, if we can come back in September. Everything else is kind of on the back burner because this is going to occupy, we have about 2 months to figure this out. So I know I said it in an update to you guys late last week that I was asking for all of you and your committees to sort of put things on pause for the time being, because if you're going to move forward with whether it's policy or finance or even in curriculum, right now all our energy is going to need to be focused on what do we need to do to prepare to open up in September. And that's going to have an effect on existing things you might be working on. Just from a policy perspective, attendance is something that's going to come under fire during this. Obviously, finance, that's going to have to play a big issue on that. So all of our attention is going to need to be focused on what they're telling. We can't wait any longer. Unfortunately, they keep moving the goalpost. And I see Jonathan on my screen, so I see he got a haircut and he doesn't have the mustache anymore, but, which I like. But the best example I can give you is anyone who was planning to get a haircut last week, what happened? Everybody was set to open, and that day they went on TV and said, nope, we changed our mind. We're going to wait till June 1st. Well, we're not immune to that in our world, but we're at a point now where I don't believe we can wait any longer. We have to start moving forward to prepare for what the fall is going to bring. So I know that's on the agenda to discuss later. I will share with you when we get to that point some of the just highlight concerns for the public to know the things that we have to explore and look into. But at this point, that would conclude the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Drezek. I'll go around again. Mr. Ryder, any questions?
No, thank you very much. No questions on what Mr. Drezek brought us up to speed on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thurston, any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Ms. Hall, any questions? Unmute yourself, Ms. Hall. There you go.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blank, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. About the $735,000 that we're going to get in from the CARE Act. Is that like a split between the education and the town side, or is it just devoted to EPS?
So that's the school funding reimbursement through the CARE Act.
I think that's
thus far. There is an application that the state has to send to us, and our partners at the town have been doing a great job collecting all of our COVID-related expenses to share for reimbursement as well. So we do partner on that, but this particular funding was designated just for school system for the reasons that I outlined. They realize a lot of struggling with finding technology for kids, training, having access for those who don't have access, Wi-Fi and broadband in their homes. So that's where the funding, and because it's based on your Title I enrollment, that's why our number is a little bit higher than you may see in some other communities.
I think that's amazing because it's just going to help with our efforts and the fact that we are so unsure about what's going to happen this fall. And I feel like based on what Ms. Esty said and what you've been saying all along, no matter what happens into September, our school district is taking an approach to do the more PD for virtual learning and different things like that. I do have one question about the graduation. I just wanted to clarify, are we not letting the parents out of the cars to take the pictures of the graduates? Is it just the graduate that's getting out of the car?
the way that it was approved through the health department was that the graduate is able to exit the vehicle, and no one else. Now,
Okay,
perhaps-
but the parents will have the opportunities to take the photos.
yes. And I think a lot of it, and you hear this a lot with, updates coming statewide, is we just need to be smart.
Yeah.
So we're going to have people there. We're not cops. We will have police officers there for a safety perspective, but we're not looking to get anybody in trouble. We just want to make sure people are following the rules that we didn't create, but we unfortunately have to live by. So, if a parent needs to step out of the car to make sure they get a photo, there's also going to be a professional photographer there. We're going to try to accommodate as best we can, as long as it's within the.
Okay, because I think there's a common misconception that between the Board of Ed and the admin and central office that there is not nobody's really exploring ways to make it as personal as we can. And I think, we're at the mercy of what, Governor Lamont's executive order says, and then the Department of Public Health, whose first concern is the health of the community. I'm wondering too, is if for some reason we didn't follow all the protocols that were given to us, we might not qualify for any more funds. I would think that would be a way for them to kind of come back into town for not following guidelines.
Well, glad you mentioned that. There's something in the guidelines I sent you earlier called safe harbor and liability considerations. So the state should consider ways to mitigate liability for those boards of education that, in good faith and to the greatest extent possible, comply with the planning efforts set out in this document and all relevant public health and safety mandates and orders. So as long as we're making a good faith effort to instill all of these guidelines, it doesn't say you're indemnified. It just says they should consider ways to mitigate liability. So again, if we were to say, you know what, we don't believe this is right, just everybody go down to high school, get your diplomas, and we'll do it that way. It's a pretty clear line that we have no indemnification in this situation.
And I also think one of the things that we're seeing that some of the towns are doing alternative graduations. They seem to be, the smaller towns, the Class S size schools that maybe have 100 to 120 graduates. I had mentioned I felt like we were more in line with like East Hartford and Manchester and Glastonbury and their plans for graduation at this time. I don't know anything, south of Hartford, like the other bigger towns like Newington and stuff like that. But I just feel like we're more in a line with those classes that have bigger size graduates. So
we're very similar to those of our size.
And I'm glad you sent us the Massachusetts guidelines, because I think that they come out saying, oh, Massachusetts is going to allow graduations, but then when you see the guidelines, they're going to be difficult to follow. So I appreciate you sending that to us. I'm getting a lot of graduation questions. So I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair, I find I do have a question. May I insert it?
Go ahead, Mrs. Hall.
Mr. Dresek, do we have any tentative plans for summer school of any kind?
We do, and I apologize, Ms. Hall. I was actually, my last note that I was lumping the summer school document and I forgot to conclude. The reason that these guidelines were initially sent with us were for us to follow in the event that we were going to hold an in-person summer school. And after conversations with obviously the public health director, and as well as with all of our colleagues in the area, for the amount of time kids would be in our summer programs, the guidelines were so restrictive that we didn't believe that we could comply to have an in-person summer school this year. But we are going to still hold summer school, but it's going to remain virtual for this year. And a letter will be going out to all families in the next coming days from Julie Carroll, who oversees summer school. But we had to make a decision about conducting in person or remaining virtually. We were waiting for clearance from the state to see if we had that option, or this was you're going to do it and follow the rules, or you can continue to do it in a hybrid manner. The state was clear that they understand that a lot of districts in the short period of time we'd have to put all of these restrictions in place. It wasn't feasible for us to do that. So the head of the Bureau of Special Education informed all of us that we can conduct, and most likely a lot of districts will be doing summer school virtually this year, and we will be doing that as well. I apologize. I meant to conclude with that. It says going all virtual. That was my last note.
Thank you. It did say in reading the summer school regulations that just having a bus, one bus, would be more demanding than anything else we could do. So doing it virtually makes sense at this point. Thank you.
Ms. Costa, any questions?
I have no questions. I would just like to reiterate my support for the need for one-on-one devices, and that we get that accomplished. I worry that at the kindergarten, first grade level, some of what they're learning isn't conducive to learning on a device. It's about sharing, it's about getting along, but it is what it is. And so I'm fully supportive of the one-to-one devices. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Mr. Rutledge.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rutledge. Mr. Salazar.
I do have some questions, if I may. In the interest of clarification, Mr. Drazek, you made a statement. You said 1 car per graduate and as many family members as they can fit in that car. Is that truly what you meant to say?
I think legally, I think it's up to, if you're, now the 5 gathering, it doesn't apply to if you have, say, 7 people in your home. So if you have a vehicle and you have 7 people in your home, as long as you stay in your vehicle, we're not going to encourage people to hang out the windows, but I think Ms. Clark clarifies that one car per family. So.
Okay, and the reason I actually asked that question is because in Ms. LeBlanc also kind of, attempted to address that with, can parents get out and take pictures? I guess my concern is that even though we are not going to be policing that, ourselves are going to be policing that event, that there is a certain responsibility that we have to be clear and to not only enumerate the guidelines, but to make every good faith attempt to make sure that they're adhered to. And so I would assume that many, if not all of you, share my same concern. And so I don't know if it's a question, more of a comment, but I am concerned that, we are, for lack of a better expression, that we put out guidelines and that are left up for interpretation, and then the event kind of tends to get out of hand, and that may ruin it for the remainder of the individuals participating. So it's a concern. I don't know if it's well funded or not founded, in fact, but again, it's a concern, and I just wanted to express it. The other question that I have is, Ms. Estes brought up the concern that there are some students that they haven't been able to get a hold of. Is that something you can address? Is that, do you have any information? You can share it if you were planning to engage in that discussion later, but I thought that I would take this opportunity to inquire, where are we with that? Is that a fact? Do we have students that we've completely lost track of?
There is some truth. There are some students that we've had, district-wide, not just in her particular classroom.
Sure.
That we've had struggles making contact with. So the way we've been handling it is, if a teacher isn't making contact with that student, then we're having principals try to reach out either in any way that we have the ability to communicate with those families. So in some cases, we may just have a phone number for them. But any time that a teacher is unable to make contact with a student, I know that's being moved up the chain to the administration so that we're establishing some connection. But the reality is, yeah, there are going to be some families and some kids that we just can't reach. And that's the heartbreaking part about all this. As much as we call, as much as we've sent, in some cases, community officers to reach out to families to make sure that they're not responding in whatever format that we have a way to communicate with them. To send somebody out to make sure that we do checks on them, to make sure that the kids or everybody's okay. But yeah, that there is some truth to that. We try to mitigate it as best as we can. as long as we've been doing this now, it's gotten better. But there are some cases where you won't hear from a family or from a child for weeks on end. And our teachers try to do, and I give them all the credit in the world, is they just don't stop. They keep sending messages. Principals are making phone calls. As I said, we've actually sent community officers in some cases just to make sure we establish connections. But that's one of the advantages of every kid has a device, and we know they have it, and we're ensuring that they have connectivity in their house. We can tell that family, just turn it on. Just turn it on at 8 o'clock, and there'll be a face on the other end. But when you're dealing with families who don't have access to devices, some kids might just be on a phone. So it is challenging and it's heartbreaking, but we're doing the best we can to make sure we reach every kid.
Okay, and lastly, my last question, I know that you mentioned that, the idea is to deploy one device per student, and you're working to make that a reality, and that's great news. Is it going to be iPads across the board? Is that what we're targeting, or is there any other evaluation, or has that already been done?
That was done prior to going to the iPads the first time, when we could do the iPad versus Chromebook comparison. And a lot of it had to do precisely on the platforms that we're on. Because we weren't in order to go to a Chromebook, you have to be on the Google platform, and we were on the Microsoft Office platform, Office 365. And one of the things that I learned through the process was I always thought that, the Google education piece was probably more superior than the Microsoft. But I had never, just like Pam said, I had never experienced Teams because I never had a need. But as I've gotten more comfortable with it and I see all the components of it, the good thing about the Apple products is you can use them for multiple platforms. So although we're going to, emphasize using the platform that we're on, in the event we were ever to make a switch, you have that ability on the iPad to get on any platform you wish. And what we're finding is, especially now we're talking about devices for our younger kids. Our middle school kids don't have them, but we're looking at, K through 5. One of the things that's concerning me is a lot of my colleagues are trying to get their hands on iPads for their elementary students as well. So our inkling of we were heading in the right direction has been confirmed by everyone who's reaching out to me as, the iPad guy at the high school, that a lot of, particularly for our younger kids, it addresses a lot more of our teachers are able to do a lot more with the interaction on an iPad, especially for our little guys, than they could on a phone.
I appreciate your candid responses. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Mr. LeBlanc, any questions?
No question per se. I just wanted to kind of, as our superintendent mentioned, by the way, yes, my quarantine stash is gone, but the importance of, you brought up the graduation. I know we received an email from some students. I just want to, as you pointed out, as a local town, we're doing everything we can to try to make it as traditional as possible for our students. And I'm proud of all the options we're looking at. I just would encourage those students that emailed us to then forward those concerns onto their state reps. And if the state reps get the email, I call on the state reps to then forward that to the governor, as was kind of the same situation that happened up in Massachusetts. And then, you talked about, getting on top of the iPads and, again, reiterate the graduation. I think, again, this calls for the importance of, trying to look towards weekly meetings and possibly keeping our Tuesday nights open till the start of next school year on a regular basis to start addressing the many unknowns and trying to find some solutions. So I'm throwing that one out there, but there's a lot to cover. I appreciate the update, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. I'm just going to add that, like Mr. Drezek said, that, 5 is the maximum. Well, look at what we're doing right now. We have a council chambers that's empty. We can't even go in there and have a meeting of 12. There's 9 of us and the 3 administrators that are there. We can't even go in there and have a meeting. So if we can't do 12, how are we going to do 360? It just doesn't it doesn't work. So we have to go by the guidelines, and I understand that in Massachusetts, but you got to remember there's a border between us and Massachusetts. We are in Connecticut. We can't follow what Massachusetts says because we have to follow what Connecticut says, even though we border Massachusetts. But we are doing what we can and what we have to work with, and until the governor relaxes our meeting status, that's where we're at. So we'll leave it at that. Let's move to. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to add in, and Mr. LeBlanc, I was going to take it at a different time. You all did receive an email from the Student Council Board of the senior class at Enfield High School. And I think it was very well articulated. And again, you read these emails and it's heartbreaking. All these kids that want is just their day. And you don't want to keep telling kids no that you can't do it. So my response, I copied you all on it, was we're still open for anything. But unfortunately, the rules are right now. They did request that this get added to the agenda this evening. And because it was a special meeting, we weren't able to do that. But I did promise the kids that I would bring this up tonight, and I know you've all touched upon it, and I was going to bring it up after. But, I think it's kind of wait and see. I mean, if the rules change as we go, we can call a meeting and say, these are the options if you want to do something in addition. But I think the plan that we have in place right now would be disingenuous to our kids if we didn't complete that plan, because there's always a possibility that at any point in time, the goalposts can get moved again, or they can pull the rug out from us. So the kids, again, you read it and it's heartbreaking to hear and to read. And I give the kids a lot of credit for continuing to push and continuing to advocate for themselves, which is a great sign. And just that I'm sure they're watching now. We're still going to do everything we can to give you the best process, to give you the best program we can. If there's something we can do down the road, we certainly are open to. I was going to mention that later, but Mr. LeBlanc beat me to it, so thank you.
And just to say, I've been watching the YouTube streaming, and we have 50 people watching. So thank you all for watching. That's more than what we had last meeting. So anyway, old business policy revision 5113 students attendance policy, second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Hall. Seconded by Ms. Costa. So this is just a second reading from the last time we were live and in person meeting from March 10th. That this kind of just got dropped off the agenda, so we're trying to get caught up on it. So, any other discussion on this policy revision? Sensing none, roll call, please. Kathy, unmute yourself.
Mr. LeBlanc, sorry about that.
4.
Mr. Salazar,
He's a 4.
Mr. Rutledge,
4.
Mrs. Costa,
4.
Mrs. LeBlanc.
I'm going to approve this policy at this time, but until necessary changes are made at the policy committee, I will not be approving any more policies after tonight. Thank you.
Mrs. Hall,
Approve.
Mrs. Thurston,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
4.
Chairman Krizel.
4.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Number 7, new business. Discussion and action, if any, regarding the last day of school. Mr. Drezek, do you want to address that, or we want to let Mr. Ryder do it?
I will defer to Mr. Ryder.
Mr. Ryder, you want to announce the last day of school?
Well, we spoke about this. See, virtual meetings. Very exciting. Stand by. No, we mentioned
2 barks for yes and 1 bark for no. Is that how it works?
No, I would just like to propose formally to make a motion to make the last day of school for students be Friday, June 12th at this meeting.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ryder, seconded by Ms. Hall. Any other discussion? So our last day of distant learning will be June 12th, and that is per state rules that we have to have at least 180 days. So we're waiving the 180 for today in at the same time. Do we need a separate motion for waiving the 180 for today, or one motion? One motion. Okay, I got that. All right, any other discussion? Roll call, please. Oh, well, Mr. Blank, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just ask a question? One of the many questions that we're getting is, would that be the expectation that parents should anticipate virtual learning through June 12th? Or, I mean, at the high school, we might see it a little bit differently.
Yeah, the conclusion of the last virtual learning day for students would then be June 12th if this passes.
Okay, thank you.
Staff are still on the clock a little later than that, but hopefully as we start preparing for the fall, that'll give us an opportunity to free up staff to start training for this.
Perfect, understood. I think parents were just kind of wondering, what they should be anticipating. So thank you.
They had enough.
Thank you, Mr. Blank. Any other discussion? Ms. Thurston, go ahead.
I just want to thank the parents. Like Tina said, we've been getting a lot of emails, and these guys did not sign up for this, and they are working their butts off. And I know it's not been easy for them. So I think they're going to be celebrating as much as the kids are. So to the parents, congratulations, you got your date. And I'm glad we were able to do it sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Ms. Thurston. Any other discussion? Sensing none, roll call, please.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yeah, I'm in agreement. This school year needs to end. So June 12th, I'm for.
Mr. Salazar, Mr. Rutledge,
4.
Mrs. Costa,
Or,
Mrs. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Hall,
Or,
Mrs. Thurston,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
4. That
Chairman
leaves 13
Crisell.
school days left.
Chairman Crisell.
4.
Motion passes.
Thank you. 7B, discussion and creation of a subcommittee for reopening schools. So let's open a motion just for discussion at this time. Do I have a motion for discussion only?
so moved.
Moved by Mr. Salazar, seconded by Ms. Hall. So the discussion, I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Costa.
Thank you. I brought this up briefly at our last meeting, that I think the creation of a subcommittee to focus on just assisting in any way that we can in getting our schools ready for return to school in September, whatever that looks like. And I now see that a lot of towns are starting to do the same thing. I think there's just a very, very slim possibility that schools would just reopen to where they were in March before we closed. I just don't see that that's what's going to happen. So I think it's much more likely that they're going to open with a lot of restrictions around class size, social distancing, PPE, all that sort of stuff. And yes, there's also a chance that we're not going to be allowed to open at all. But I do think that if we are, we need to be prepared, because I think our kids will do much better academically and emotionally if they can get back in the classroom. So I view this committee as sort of working collaboratively with various stakeholders, just to make sure that whatever guidelines we're operating under, and in some cases, we may need to start moving without the final guidelines, because we can't wait till August 15th to get ready for school. But just topics, curriculum, busing, lunches, finance, what policy changes do we need? What facility needs do we need? How can we get sports in there after school activities? Will there be any? And just that sort of stuff. And maybe even to some extent collaborate with our state reps to sort of try and influence some decisions around these things. I view it as a committee that's going to have to probably meet weekly. It's going to need to be flexible based upon where we are and when the state's going to come out with some formal guidelines. I know that Jonathan has expressed an interest in joining in this team, and I certainly welcome as many as would like to. If a couple from the Dem side would like to join the team, We'll have administration, and then we'll involve others as we need them to move forward. But I highly recommend this.
So I would like to see 4 members on this committee, 2 from Republican, 2 from Democrat side. No, we don't have to set names tonight, but this is just a tentative plan for this committee. So, Mr. Drezek, is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't want to discourage anyone, but careful what you wish for. No, I agree with Ms. Costa. I think we're at a point now where, we have at least the initial roadmap as to what our expectations are for the fall. And there's a lot of implications for not just for the administration, but conversations we'd have to have with our counterparts at the town. There's going to be financial implications. There's going to be implications on here that I don't even know how to, for instance, we have under the document I gave you, health guidance for employees, testing and, testing must be available for staff and students if there's a suspected case. I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to get. I know last I heard there's a shortage on things. There's things like that. Installing, no-touch entrances and exits and bathroom fixtures. So these are conversations we need to start having now. And I think it's going to have an implication on all the work everybody else is doing. But unfortunately, this, in my opinion, is going to be our biggest priority going forward. So I appreciate your willingness to do it. And I hope that, the 4 of you are willing to get your hands dirty and figure out how we're going to do this with us.
I also do want to open it up to the council, possibly getting one from each side of the council involved too. So with that, also putting that in as a tentative possibility. Mr. Ryder, please.
So we're still in discussion about this as a topic, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I of course would want to volunteer to be a part of this. I know that we decided loosely that we would continue Board of Ed meetings throughout the summer, sticking to our 2nd and 4th Tuesdays. What I would suggest, this is just my suggestion, is supplementing this committee meeting to be that every other Tuesday. So we are still meeting weekly, those that are on both this committee and the Board of Ed. I don't know, to Mr. Drezek's point, that enough changes daily to meet just as a Board of Ed weekly, but maybe we supplement this committee meeting with the Board of Ed meetings. So therefore, we are still communicating with the public and with what our plans are going to be for the fall, but coming from both sides of this, as a implemental and practical side of it through the subcommittee, and also as a Board of Education and the roles we normally have being our 2nd and 4th Tuesdays. That's my suggestion.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Scott, yeah, I actually agree with you. I think that's a good point. I think, if this subcommittee is set up, then yeah, that substitutes for possibly that week in between. At least members of the board are meeting on a weekly basis, discussing these important issues. So yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Hall.
I actually think that such a committee, as we're calling it, a reopening schools, should involve more than just the Board of Education or even the council. That we need participation from teachers, from parents, whomever would be truly the stakeholders in this. That we need input from the variety of participants, and not just us talking about what we've been reading as a requirement for the day or the week or the month or whatever. And I've read them all, and I find them off-putting completely. And to modify them to fit our local needs, I believe we need more than just our elected officials to discuss it.
That's a great point. And Ms. Costa, go ahead. We had discussions on that also. Go ahead, Ms. Costa.
Joyce, I don't disagree at all. And I think there's probably a need for certain people to be on the committee. What I was really thinking, though, is that parents especially, but when it comes to an IT, we're going to have IT needs, be it laptops or tablets for everybody or whatever. I don't think we need an IT person on the actual committee. Certainly we need Guy to come in and talk to us or whatever. what I don't want to do is have 30 people show up at every meeting and we don't have time to address any one thing. So when it comes to talking about curriculum, when it comes to talking about building and grounds in terms of, do we need to put in hand sanitizers, or do we need to tape off some of the sinks, or do we need to, whatever the solutions are going to be. I don't know that they need to be an official part of the committee and they're at every meeting. Being a public meeting, anybody can go anyway, because it's going to be, there's going to be an agenda and whatever. I agree about parents and teachers, certainly, especially when it comes to things like special education or certain, but at some point you may also need, teachers that represent the spectrum of K through 2, middle school, high school, because it's going to be it could be a very different structure when you talk about distance learning at those different grade levels. And I don't know that you need 7 teachers every week coming to the table if it's a week where we're only going to talk about what we're doing in the facilities or whatever.
Ms. LeBlanc, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think if we get into that big of a committee, I think we have to have a resolution, correct? Does anybody know? Like, where we'd have to have a resolution passed to have the committee through the town council?
Resolution made by whom?
If we were going to set up a committee, usually when we set up committees that have a residence, we set up a resolution, we have a charge of the committee, and then residents apply, and then they're approved for the committee.
And I think we need parental input. I haven't fleshed through what they should really
So if
be.
I'm understanding you correctly, Wendy, what you're saying is you will form the committee, and whoever from the Board of Ed would like to be on it is going to be on it. And then based on different things that the committee, like different issues that come up or different ideas that come up, that would direct on who you might bring into the next meeting.
Correct. Like if we have to
Okay.
come up with a solution for lunches because we're not going to be allowed to have a cafeteria. Well, we don't need, I don't know, we don't need Guy to come in and talk about it because we're not going to serve them on their tablets. So, we bring in, nutrition specialists or whatever to talk about that, and maybe even building and grounds, just because there might be an impact to cleaning it or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I viewed it more as certainly getting input from all the stakeholders, but whether they're actually a part of the committee or not.
This would, Walter, if I can just.
Go ahead.
What Tina's saying, those are, I think, special advisory committees to the board. So like in the years past, we've had like the Fermi committee and all those things. Those require resolutions because members of the community were actually voting members of the committee. I'm understanding this would be essentially a new subcommittee of the board soliciting input. And I do agree with Wendy saying, because if you just look at the document I gave you, like, you can't do any of this at the high school. So that's going to have to be a separate discussion, at the high school. So there might be a time where we're going to need more folks in the high school. Maybe you can get teachers and parents and, paraprofessionals, the cafeteria staff to take part in that discussion. Whereas in primary schools, it's going to be a completely different conversation. In years past, when the boards had those advisory committees and there's been a member of the public that has a voting spot, that's when you would do the resolution and then have the town council. But I think you have a council liaison to the Board of Ed. I'm not quite sure.
I believe it's Charlotte.
So you can, by my understanding, and I'll double check this with Chris, is that because you have a liaison, they can serve in that role on an advisory role to the board because of that, on a sitting committee.
That's what I was going to say, is that we have a liaison from the council.
Because technically you have, like, in years past, we have a contract negotiation committee, and there's a town council member who sits on it. There's no resolution for it, they just appoint. I think you can do that similarly here if you choose.
I mean, it's more of a working committee than anything. I don't believe that we're going to be voting on anything or nothing. It's just to gather information and hash it out, and is what I'm seeing. Ms. LeBlanc, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think that when it's described as a Board of Ed subcommittee, then I understand it a little bit better. I just know that when we've gone out and done these other types of committees, like joint facilities and the building committees, it has to be handled in a different way. But I know that we can form Board of Ed subcommittees at any time. So thank you.
Mr. LeBlanc.
So I understand like the guest speaker aspect of it, where on a meeting by meeting basis, but if there happen to be other outside officials who aren't elected, like town employees or whatever, that doesn't interfere at all, or right? Like if we were to have like the health department, I'm throwing it, it's a question, I don't know.
No, you can invite anyone. It's the same way if you're on the finance committee and you invite our investment company in to come talk about our tag thing, our tag program with the investment piece. It's just, it's a guest to the committee for that particular meeting.
Right, but if they were there for every meeting,
I'm in the public meeting, so technically people can show up, and in whatever format we were to figure this out with. If it's a public meeting, you know, people wanted to go to every single policy committee meeting, they could.
Right.
My only recommendation, and that's totally up to you, I don't want to make more work for you guys, is whatever the makeup of the committee, it might be helpful if those who are choosing to be part of this also are representing another committee that they're on. So like, for instance, I know like Scott offered, and also know he sits on policy. So it would be helpful because there's also going to need to be communications to the other subcommittees to say, okay, guys, we need to meet and, you know, change the attendance policy again because of this. Or
Correct.
so Wendy, I know you're with finance or whatever. Or Joyce, if you want just to have that, or Bill or whomever wants to have the connection to the main committees, just so that you can keep that communication open. That's just a suggestion.
Yep.
Any other discussion? So can I have a motion to create this committee as we've noted?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Costa, seconded by Mr. LeBlanc. And just so you know, I'm naming Wendy Costa as chairman of the committee, and Jonathan LeBlanc is also a member. And on the other side, you two inform Wendy, inform Wendy who wants to sit on it is fine with me. And so do we need a roll call?
Yes, you do.
Please roll call it.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Oh, 4.
Mr. Salazar. Yes. Mr. Rutledge,
4.
Mrs. Costa,
Or
Mrs. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Hall,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurston,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
4.
Chairman Krizel.
4.
Motion passes.
Thank you, and I agree with Mr. Ryder that this could be we could do a live meeting on the Tuesday between, and then you can have just a regular meeting on the other weeks or something, and bring us information on our weeks of Board of Ed meetings if need be. So thank you very much. So now we'll turn to board member comments, and we'll start with Mr. Ryder.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to let everybody know that with the last day of school now being known to all as Friday, June 12th, that leaves 13 more distance learning days. There is an end in sight, so please hang in there. For some parents or staff or children that hear this and have been frustrated, just know that we will be done in the next 2.5 weeks. And I appreciate everybody hanging in there. This is important. We are still learning from home. The buildings are closed. School is not closed. Please hang in there another 13 more weekdays. We'd appreciate that. Also wanted to let everybody know that I saw today that the Enfield Public Libraries are now opening up for curbside pickup. So please check the Enfield Public Libraries websites for more on that. I wanted to congratulate our Enfield High School valedictorian, Sean Selesky, and our salutatorian, Arvid Kalasia. I apologize if I didn't pronounce the last name correctly, but I wanted to congratulate both of you officially. I saw that was official, and I wanted to make sure that you guys are recognized for that. Also for next year, class of 2021, they've now begun early fundraising for next June. They've begun flocking. I don't know if you guys have seen that or not, but there's a flocking form available on enfieldpto.com and on the Facebook page. They are doing that. Even with social distancing, you can still see flocks of birds coming to your home. We did have some questions that came in from the PTO parents that they've been seeing on the PTO pages. And I know that we will address this as soon as we have answers. We don't have specific dates yet for turning in your devices. There's still 13 more days of school. Please hang on to them. Please continue to use them. We don't have final dates as far as when we'll be mailing out report cards, but again, all that will be coming in the coming weeks. So everybody hang in there. I also wanted to let everybody else know that there are a lot of great resources out there for parents and guardians and grandparents and caregivers from the Family Resource Center. So the Enfield Family Resource Center has 2 home bases, one at Stowe and one at Henry Barnard. If you go to enfieldpto.com/Stowe or /Henry Barnard, you'll see links. And they provide a lot of support, even in these times with buildings being closed, not school. There's virtual meetings for grandparents raising grandchildren. There's a lot of parent support groups. There's meetings every week for parents. There's virtual meetings at 7 o'clock on Mondays and 1 o'clock on Wednesdays. If one day works better for you or one time works better for you, please reach out to them. There's evening virtual play groups. There's virtual gatherings of music classes and how to make ice cream. And there's a lot of stuff out there. So I wanted to thank Erin Grimes. She's somebody when when EFRC was located at Hazardville years ago, I got to know Erin, and I appreciate everything that her and her team and Amy Morales does from the Family Resource Center. So there's a link to that on enfieldpto.com. There's also a Facebook page for the Family Resource Center. Please reach out to them. There's a lot of great things that they do for our community, and I want to thank them for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Mr. Ryder, Ms. Thurston. No comments. Thank you. Ms. Hall.
I'm beginning to think that I may have to sign up for Facebook along the way. I may be missing out on things. On the other hand, I don't really need anything more to read online. However, especially with all the regulations that were being sent about school opening or summer school, and it's interesting to note that the colleges are starting to say they're going to be opening, and they're doing both virtual and in-person classes for the same subject, which I thought was most interesting, so that you could choose whether you wanted to come in person or watch online. But other than that, I don't need to add anything to tonight's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. LeBlanc.
Okay, just a couple things. I will say to Miss Hall that my 2 of my kids' colleges said they're opening up in the fall, so that'll be interesting to see how they're going to take care of distance learning, although they go to small colleges. I am, and I think they are at this point in the quarantine, highly anticipating going back to school. I wanted to take a moment tonight. I'm wearing a shirt. It says Mila Strong. We have a wonderful family in Enfield who is not only enduring the social distancing and the pandemic, but their granddaughter is been diagnosed with leukemia, and they were selling these Mila Strong shirts. She's 2 years old. They're an amazing family, and I just want to let them know that my heart goes out to them every day, and every day I think about them. It made a very difficult time for them with this diagnosis, and then on top of it all during the pandemic, it's just been additionally hard being able to be supportive of their family. So I just wanted to say that. I too have been hearing about textbooks and device returns. Mr. Murray from Enfield High sent out a fabulous email today, and we posted it, both Scott and I posted it on Facebook and on the Enfield PTO, which discussed students going in. So I guess the parents will just have to hold tight because we'll be getting the students in there. I know JFK did theirs last week. One of the things I forgot to ask through the chair to Mr. Drezek is, I know that some parents that are essential workers are concerned. They would just like to get enough time for their scheduled appointment for their graduate to walk across the stage. So whenever Ms. Clark is ready, they're just concerned that they want to make sure they get the appropriate time off from work. And Let me see. I think that's all I have. I just want to say I'm happy that the end of school is on June 12th. I appreciate everyone who emailed the board as a whole and individually today. Some of us really care about what you say, and we really take it to heart. And we've heard from a lot of the community members, and we all, understand how you're feeling. We may not be able to relate to it if we don't have the younger kids, but you've been great. Just like I've told some teachers, don't be too hard on yourself. Like Miss Esty said, sometimes you just have to know what your kid or your kids need in that moment. And, we're all in this together. So I just want to say thank you to the parents and thank you to the teachers. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Blank. Ms. Costa.
I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Mr. Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I wanted to talk about one thing here, and it's kind of a continuation of something I brought up at the last meeting. I'm going to start this by actually posing a question. So I have a list of 17 towns here. Suffield, Somers, West Hartford, East Windsor, Granby, Verdon, Tolland, Farmington, Wethersfield, Litchfield, Clinton, Portland, Winstead, Reading, Sprague, Norwich, and Newtown. If anybody is wondering what those 17 towns have in common, it's every single one of their boards of education allows public participation via remote communication, either via dial-in or via the means we're talking at right now. Just because I was bored the other day, I decided to pick 20 random municipalities in Connecticut. And of the 20 that I picked, those 17 allowed the aforementioned public participation. Just to be fully transparent, the towns of Ledyard, Montville, and Watertown do not. Already in town, we've shown that virtual meeting technology can be used for town council and board of ed meetings. We can have guests attend via virtual means. Our planning and zoning does virtual meetings, and they allow people to testify over the phone. Doctors are doing that. Those of us who work in the office environments may use Zoom, WebEx, Ring Central, Office Suite meetings, whatever the technology is. And I'm really hoping that Enfield can get on board with this. We could implement the appropriate procedures for this. For example, we could share the link on the agenda, or we could mandate that people wishing to make public comments email us at least a day in advance so the link and other information can be shared. But I do think it's important that we do this. I've said this before, it's easier to govern when times are going well and everything is swell and nice, but in crisis situations like we've experienced over the last few months, this is where it gets even more important for our elected boards and councils to not only be visible and accessible, but also to be accessible. I know some people out there might say that it's very possible in a month. I think if I could be wrong, I think our mayor is hoping that by July we'll be meeting in person. And some might say, well, if we're meeting in person again, this issue becomes moot. But I would truly beg to differ on that. And it really just goes back to accessibility of government. Even if we meet in person, there are going to be people who want to offer feedback, but maybe they have kids at home. Maybe they work second shift. Maybe they just can't make it to a meeting. And maybe they can't make it to a meeting if it means leaving the home, but they could do it from home. So even offering the ability to speak one's mind, even if it's remotely, would definitely go a long way towards improving the accessibility of government, and it would give people a chance for their voice to be heard. Now, again, some might reply with a comment on how people can email their comments in and get them read into the record, and that's absolutely right. Anybody can email the comments in, and during the correspondence and the communications section, our secretary, Ms. LeBlanc, could read that into the record. But on that point though, consider this. Let's say you want to come in front of this board and talk about something you're very passionate about. Are you really, in all honesty, going to trust somebody to convey your message with all the heart and soul that you would if you were delivering that same message? And this should not be interpreted as any kind of knock or slight on anybody. It would be including myself, whomever. If I was reading somebody else's message, no matter how much I probably tried to get behind it, I can't guarantee that I would give it the same feeling that they would give it if it's a passionate issue. This is not just a case of people wanting to have their own voice heard or their proverbial 5 minutes of fame. This is about giving people a voice and the opportunity to use their voice to speak on matters near and dear to their heart. So I would appreciate some feedback as to how we can go about putting something like this into place for future meetings. And you know, until this is done, I do plan on bringing this up because I do feel very passionately about this. You know, I'll continue to bring this up. I know there was a comment last meeting that, or I believe that, like, you know, our town attorney or somebody was going to be consulting on this, but given that other boards are doing this in town, other commissions in town are doing this, other Board of Eds around the state are doing this, I really don't see any reason why we can't do this too. So thank you very much.
Ms. Costa, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Rutledge, can I just ask a question? Of those 17 towns or any other towns that you looked at that are doing that, did you contact them, or do you have any stats that say, you know, what their participation was like previous to doing that and what it was like afterwards? And did they end up with any equivalents to keyboard warriors, where people who wouldn't normally come and show their face are willing to over the phone or whatever?
No, I didn't. Basically, the way I was able to find that out is that I literally looked at a map of Connecticut, and I literally almost did eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and just picked a town because I wanted to be incredibly random. I went to their Board of Ed and their Board of Ed, and potentially, depending on their type of government, their Board of Selectmen or Town Council or whatever it may be page, and honestly looked at their agendas. And I would look on their agendas, and on all those 17 towns, there was a section where it listed the dial-in number, it listed like the WebEx link or whatever were appropriate, and it showed the section for public comments, regardless if it was a regular or a special Board of Ed meeting. That was sometimes indicated, but in both cases, there was that. Very often there were rules for, you know, some places allowed only 2 minutes and it had to be an agenda item. Some places allowed 5 minutes, could be whatever you want. As for stats as to how many people actually participated, no, I was not able to find that information, but I would honestly almost argue that the number of people that would participate would be irrelevant, because even if nobody wants to participate, at least making it an option, you know, at least sends a message that we are accessible and we're willing to listen to you if you want to speak.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rutledge. Mr. Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just be brief. I too, like a couple of other members of the board stated already, had never received as much email as I received this time regarding the issue of when the last day of school is. And so to that point, I just wanted to, first of all, thank the people that wrote, that took the time to let their opinions be known. And then secondly, I wanted to remind people that it is not possible for us to talk about what votes we may be taking or which direction we're going to be, you know, heading with that. So I don't want people to think that, you know, they're being ignored. It's just that it's not possible for us to engage at that level of conversation. And I am very appreciative, as everybody else I'm sure is as well, of people providing their input. So thanks to them, and I encourage them to keep doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Mr. LeBlanc.
Yeah, to touch on to Bill, I think it goes for the 9 of us across the board. We're here 24/7, and you can look us up. So never be afraid to reach out to any of us for any concerns. Couple things I wanted to touch on is, one, really cool thing to see is all the One Community signs in town from Kite. I don't know, I'm driving around and basically almost every yard has it, which is kind of cool. And you go to other towns and you know, you see a sporadic sign here or there, and then you come into Enfield and the One Community signs take over the town. So it goes to show how much our town supports each other, and that's really good to see. Another thing I wanted to bring up is the possible date of June 20th. The governor has mentioned for sports to resume on a youth level. I'd like to see if we could possibly get something to the CIAC to see come end of June, early July, if we can get some kind of tournament or month-long season and for our high school teams. Obviously, there's a lot of contingencies and guidelines to work out around that, and I'd leave it up to each individual team at the high school to decide if that's something they'd want to partake in or not. But I think it'd be an awesome thing if, you know, if other youth sports are being played, that we get our seniors out on the field, you know, and see what that can spark up, and give them one last hurrah to wear the Enfield jersey. So just a suggestion to toss out there. And that's all for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blank. So I'm going to start that today I went into the high school to videotape a speech for graduation. My first comment was that it was going to be very short because of the overwhelming applause I got last year for not speaking. So it was very short. So, but I thought with the situation we're in, that I thought a few words would be nice. And I did thank the graduates from all 9 of us. And I did see Principal Clark, and you know, and we distanced. You know, we were social distancing like we were supposed to, so everything was legit. And but I gave them all a high five, virtual high five, that they're doing a great job putting this whole graduation thing together. I did say, and I don't know if I said it to the rest of you, that we're not planning. Us board members are not planning to be on the stage at the time of graduation, just so we could keep the numbers as low as possible. She is looking into a way that we could watch from a distance up in the upper parking lot or something. So she's going to look into that and get back to us if you wish. But and she's looking at possibly 2, maybe 3 days. But she's going to, and then like Mr. Blank said that about, or was it Mr. Blank or someone said about the people working, that we should pass on to her that maybe they can, you know, work the schedule so that people, to see if it's an appropriate time for these people to come through the drive-through graduation. So, but I know they got all those things, all those ducks in a row. So I'm for sure that they're working on it fine. We're up to 31 people watching now, so I'm glad for that. I did notice after my comments 2 weeks ago that there was some Facebook posts that I was going off tangent, but I want to get back into council chambers. I don't want to do this virtual meeting stuff. I want to get back open, and if it means putting the governor on the spot, I'm going to put the governor on the spot. It just boils down to that, because, you know, it's important that we meet in person, and if we have to do it in a distant or something, and if we can do it in July, I'm all for it. So we'll go with that, and that's about all I got. So we'll leave it at that. Number 9, board committee reports, curriculum. Mr. Salazar.
I think we had a very good meeting last week. We discussed the need for maintaining contact through the summer, holding meetings throughout the summer as well, just like we're doing with the board. We also agreed on reviewing the plans together, specifically, you know, curriculum related. I expect that we will have not just, you know, reports to provide, but contributions to make to the subcommittee that we're forming. And I expect that we will be very active over the course of the summer and between now and when schools are open. So that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar.
We have our next meeting next week.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Finance, Ms. Costa.
We did not meet since the last meeting.
Thank you. Policy, Mr. Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, June 16th, where we'll continue to look at the 5,000 series. At the next Board of Ed meeting, the revisions to 9132 should be coming out for a first reading, and that's about it.
Thank you. Leadership did not meet. Joint Facilities is meeting this Thursday. No, we met last Thursday. I'm sorry. We met with, we had a presentation on solar, on what the town could do for solar. So that's what we're still working on the roofs, on getting the phase 3 done for Barnard, and possibly getting a referendum in November for the roofs. I know we're working on that too. JFK also met last Thursday, and they've got the trailers in place, and I know they got most of the contracts, and we are at this point $9 million under budget. So the numbers came in real good so far. So that's a great start. So we got the under budget part done. Now we got to work on the on time part, like we did with the high school. But knowing Gilbane, I know we're in great hands with that. So,
Mr. Chair, are we?
Yes, Ms. Hall.
Are we starting work already on the JFK?
I know that they're working on. They still got to get some permits and stuff. But as soon as all their ducks in a row, I know they're going to get in there and start up. So.
Without the schools in session, it would seem as though it could start right away.
I know they're working at that. I know that was mentioned also at the meeting. So, joint security, I guess we have nothing at this point.
Joint security next meets on Wednesday, June 3rd.
And we have no other committees that I know of at this point. So we move to number 10. Approval of minutes, special Board of Ed meeting minutes, May 12th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Thurston, seconded by Ms. Hall. Any discussion? Show of hands, all in favor?
Wait, can I discuss something?
Yes,
Oh, too
please.
late.
Please,
Sorry.
Ms. Costa.
I'd like to propose or request a couple of changes. First of all, Tina LeBlanc doesn't show up in the members present, and I know she was there because she's actually commenting later on. So if we could add her name. And then in section 6 under the board member comments, there's just one or two things. I volunteer when it talks about the JFK thing, and I wanted to make sure that we had some key deliverables that we would be reporting on a regular basis. I wasn't volunteering to do the reporting. I'm not on the committee, but I was volunteering to establish what those deliverables might be. I'd be happy to deliver them, but I don't participate in that committee. And then in the next paragraph, it says, she's referring to me, does not believe the state will be issuing guidelines. I do believe they'll issue guidelines. I don't think they'll be timely to give us enough time. I don't want anybody thinking I'm saying the state's not going to tell us what to do. They will. I just wasn't sure that they were going to be timely enough for us to react accordingly.
So do I have an approval as amended? Show of hands, all in favor. I have 9 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you.
Number 11, approval of accounts and payroll.
We have
Ms.
none.
Costa. We have none. Number 12, correspondence and communications. We have none. Do I have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Thurston? Second by Ms. Costa. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you live soon.
Have a good night.